So I recently sent out an email to my list of subscribers about dance studio tuition rates again, and why dance studios should be constantly raising their tuition rates and increasing their average student values. And as is expected, every time I send out this email, I get some pushback from some of the recipients on the idea that they're even able to raise their tuition rates. Most of them are resistant to the idea because they believe there's something about the location where they're in, where their dance studio is located, that prevents them from raising their tuition rates. And we have a lot of data on this. We know a lot about all of the different regions in the United States where we have clients, for example, or we have people who use our software products for marketing or our software products for tuition billing. And we can look at the numbers and we can crunch the numbers, and we know with a lot of certainty from the data that the location where the studio is located, the place that the studio is located, is not a good indicator of whether or not a particular dance studio is going to be able to significantly raise their tuition rates or not. So the location is not a good indicator of that. Another piece is whether or not there are other competing dance studios located close to another studio. So like the number of dance studios per capita in an area is also not a good indicator of whether or not a studio is going to be capable of significantly increasing their tuition rates. So we know those two things, but that sort of presents a new problem, a new question then. If those two things, if the amount of competition in the area and the location itself are not good indicators of whether or not a studio is going to be able to increase their tuition, then what are the good indicators of whether or not a studio is going to be able to raise their tuition successfully? There are actually a number of indicators that we have found that are better off at predicting whether or not studios will be successful at raising their tuition rates. One of them, we'll give you two of them. We'll give you some insights into two of them, and then I'll give you a little tip on how to kind of move your studio in the direction that you need to be moving. One of the indicators is whether or not a studio is good at demonstrating the value that they produce before the student even comes in, before the prospect even comes in to take a trial class. So in other words, the verbiage on the website and the presenting of the messaging on the website, the emails that you're sending out to stay in contact with your prospects, the way that your staff talks to people on the phone and when they walk into the studio, all of those things are points where we can do a better job of demonstrating the value of what it is that we offer. And the studios that we find that are doing well at that are doing a good job of demonstrating value to their market, are able to charge higher tuition rates. Okay. Now, when I say that, it probably sounds a little bit obvious, but we got to keep in mind that most dance studios out there, you go look at their website, they're not doing a good job of not only not distinguishing themselves from the competition, but they're not doing a good job of demonstrating what the real value of training with them is. We're seeing, lists of features of their studio, their schedules, and their tuition rates on their website. We're seeing they're making comments about, we have a sprung floor and our mirrors go all the way to the floor, and we have age-appropriate costumes, and we also do birthday parties, and there's like a list of features that they offer, but there's not a good demonstration of value there. And if you miss that point, yeah, it does make it hard to not only distinguish yourself from the competition, but it does make it more difficult to raise your tuition rates. On the other hand, if you do a good job of presenting that value to your market, it makes it much easier to raise your tuition rate. So that's one indicator, the amount of work that a studio is putting in to demonstrate value to their market. The second indicator that we think is maybe even more valuable than that is whether or not you and your staff have gone through some sort of training to learn how to sell things, to learn how to do the actual enrollment conference itself when it comes time to say, okay, you came in, you tried out this class, now we're going to get you signed up. Have you and your staff been through some sort of sales training, and have you learned how to do things like overcome objections, overcome pricing objections, and continue to demonstrate value at that point? And if studios have gone through some training like that, then in general they are much better at they're more successful at increasing their tuition rates successfully. So you look at my area where my studio is located, and I have a couple of studios just very, very close to me, not one, only 3 blocks away, that teach very, very similar things with very similar programs to what I have. But I'm literally charging almost 3 times as much as them. They have the same, $25, $35 registration fee and come in and take this little beginner class for $55 or whatever. We're doing $199 down payments, and we don't have a program that costs less than $149 a month. And it's not just because of the location that's 3 blocks away from the other guys. They all believe, just like many dance studios do, that they can't demand higher tuition rates. But they're not doing a good job of those two things, right? They're not doing a good job of demonstrating what the real value is of their program in their marketing, in their messaging, on their website, and in their actual communications with prospective students. But they also don't have the training that my staff has that knows how to get people actually registered and to overcome any pricing objections that might come up when we present them with these higher tuition rates. Okay, so those two things are much better indicators of whether or not a studio is going to be successful at raising its tuition. So how do you get there? Well, one little tip that I can give you is that there's a really sort of neglected period of time in your marketing funnel, in your marketing process, when a new student is coming into the studio, between the time when they've contacted you for more information about classes and the time that they actually come in and are going through your enrollment process and signing up after maybe taking a trial class or something like that. That time right there is a really good time for you to be indoctrinating this student with information on why your program is valuable, why it stands out, why it's better than the guys down the street, or whatever it is you need to deliver the messaging that really gets to these people. Okay, and we need to make sure that we do a good job of walking them through a process. We call it our prospect pipeline, of getting this person to think about our programs in a specific way before they maybe even come in the door into the studio. So as long as you're developing that, that's going to go a long way to being able to demand much higher tuition rates. So once again, the location of a dance studio or the number of other studios in the area are not good indicators of whether or not there's some elasticity in the pricing structure for a dance studio. In other words, can that dance studio significantly increase their tuition rates? By just looking at those two things, we can't tell. But if we look at the methods that the studio has in place for delivering real value and for presenting that value to the student and doing that in a way before they even come into the studio, that's a good indicator. Another good indicator is whether or not the staff and the studio owner themselves have been through some specific sales training and know what they're doing when it comes time to actually close the deal and to get somebody enrolled. And studios that have those two things in place are not just able to demand like double the tuition rate, but example, in my case, it's almost 3 times as much as the going rate in my area for new students coming in and taking classes. The first bridge that everybody needs to come across is that prospect pipeline. There needs to be some good systems in place that are helping to indoctrinate this person, helping to teach this person about all of the value that you offer before you even get them in the door. And then that lightens the load on the staff that has to actually perform the enrollments and get people signed up at these higher tuition rates. So I genuinely hope that information was helpful for everybody. And if you have any questions, let us know. Talk to you soon.